Let's start off with that first game, the highest seed coming out of the Sunset League in Division II, the Edison Chargers at home at Capshaw Field, a 42-14 win over Murrieta Valley. Edison will take on Inglewood in the quarterfinals, and like we talked about, Parker Awad unable to go at quarterback due to COVID protocols, and the senior captain, one of the best stories you'll see in high school football this season, Tyler Joya, got the start, and he dominated. We talked to Edison head coach Jeff Grady this morning about his senior quarterback, Tyler Joya.
Yeah, he looked like he'd been doing it for a long time. He's been kind of gradually building his way back, and he was sharp last night. But he practices. I said this last night. He practices like that every day. That's who he is. He practices like he plays. We got a bunch of kids like that. You got Troy Fletcher like that. Parker Awad's like that. Tyler Hampton's like that.
Well, even though it was a huge performance from Joya, nobody was surprised. I mean, it's hard to expect a guy to go over 300 yards and 5 touchdowns in the playoffs. I mean, those are just video game numbers, but he's a guy that's starting quarterback level. Like, we've known this since we first saw him back in January in club football. He's been one of our favorite Sunset League players because he can beat you with his arm. He can beat you with his legs. He's a smart player. He's also tough as nails, super athletic. I mean, we know he's coming off of an injury because he was a contributor on the defense last year, out there playing defensive back, just getting on the field wherever he can, making contributions. So when his number gets called in the playoffs in a tough game, the Chargers don't miss a beat. Coach is super confident in him. His teammates are super confident in him. And Joya is super confident in himself. And just a great performance all the way around.
In classic Edison Charger fashion, after the game, Tyler Joya caught up with our reporter Jonathan Ortiz, and he gave all the credit to his offensive line.
Well, it all started with our O-line. I mean, it was like I was playing 7-on-7 out there. I only got sacked once, and no one really touched me, so all glory to them, and my receivers played outstanding. So we had a great game plan, and we executed, and that's why we were successful.
Well, it's no surprise that Joya starts out by giving all the credit to his receivers and all the credit to his offensive line, because that's the kind of guy he is. That's why he's a captain. That's why he's respected by everybody, because he puts in the work himself, but he also understands that I'm nothing without my receivers, and I'm really nothing without the O-line. And Coach Grady echoed that sentiment to us this morning, that everything starts up front offensively. It starts and it ends up front. If you can't get the offensive line right, you're not going to get your offense going. So when you see these crazy offensive numbers from Edison, you got to give credit to the O-line. And Coach Grady singled out his 2 seniors, Jackson Graff and Johnny Godby, as 2 guys who are very productive, very reliable as football players on the O-line, but they're also leaders. And they get everybody going emotionally. They're just guys that you can lean on. And we've seen them be reliable all year, and that's a big reason why this Edison offense goes.
We couldn't wrap up this segment. We couldn't do a Sunset Rewind recap about Edison without talking about Troy Fletcher. We talk about him every single week, and he was huge once again last night for the Edison Chargers. 2 interceptions, including a pick 6, yards on the ground, a receiving touchdown. We say it all the time. He's just a football player, Howard.
Well, we talk about video game numbers, and Troy Fletcher's senior year is truly an example of off-the-charts production. It's crazy. As a football player, you lay in bed at night and think about doing things like breaking the school record, scoring 5 touchdowns in a game. Troy Fletcher does that. You're going into the playoffs against a team that averages over 50 points in Murrieta Valley. They've got a quarterback that's going to play football in the Pac-12. They've got a receiver that's going to play football in the Pac-12. This is a dynamic offense. And before the game, you think about, wow, what if I'm in zone coverage and the ball's coming my way? Could I get a pick? Could I get a pick 6 and open up the scoring for the game with a 65-yard touchdown? That's just the stuff that you dream about if you're a regular football player. But that's the stuff that Troy Fletcher does week after week. You can't ask a guy to do that type of stuff, but he just does it. 2 interceptions, 1 for a touchdown, a receiving touchdown, a productive night on the ground. I mean, these are just things. And then just playing lockdown defense, doing stuff that don't make it into the stat sheet. So Troy Fletcher, his senior season is just a showcase in how to be productive and how to make your presence felt on a football field. And it's a pleasure to watch.
It's hard to do these Edison segments sometimes because there's so many names to get in, because there's so many productive guys, but you're talking about takeaways, and Peyton Gregory had 2 fumble recoveries for the Chargers defense.
Well, Peyton Gregory's been as consistent as anybody for the Chargers, as consistent as anybody in the league. He is always getting his hands on the football, finds ways to score touchdowns on defense, just makes his presence felt. And when we see those takeaways from Troy Fletcher and Peyton Gregory, the offense capitalizes. That's why we have guys like Tucker Tripp, Tyler Hampton, a new guy, Mason York. We haven't seen him get a lot of action this season. Bam, he's scoring touchdowns. Ty Vanderhook, another guy who we know is capable, scoring touchdowns.
It's
this
crazy,
year.
dude. It's crazy how deep the Chargers are.
But what they do is, they capitalize on their opportunities. Defense gets takeaways. The offense punches it in. It's a full team effort, and we understand why these guys have CIF championship expectations.
Chargers have a fun one coming up, D2 quarterfinals at Inglewood High School next Friday. We'll preview that in our upcoming preview show this week.